Hey guys, tonight we begin with a question no one wants to hear when the candles are low and the world outside has gone quiet. What if the only job left for you involves a knife, a name scribbled in charcoal, and the promise of payment that rarely arrives? It's not cozy, but stick with me. This one's a ride. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know where you're tuning in from in the comments and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us worldwide. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your bed is straw. Your boots don't match. One leaks, and the other smells like onions and poor decisions. You're sleeping in what used to be a pig shed, now barely passing for shelter. Your back cracks every time you sit up, and the blanket you cling to has more holes than moral clarity in your current line of work. No one chooses this life. You didn't wake up one morning and think, it's time to abandon my dreams and become a hired knife. But that's what happens when the fields dry up. The Lord forgets your name, and the baker won't even let you sweep his floor anymore. So you vanish, drift, survive. And then, one night, someone presses a coin pouch into your palm and whispers a name with too many syllables and too few friends. That's how it starts. Not with glory, but with hunger. The first job wasn't even meant to be one. You were supposed to scare someone, maybe take a goat. Instead, you panicked, they slipped, and suddenly, you had a reputation. It turns out that nothing says employable like silence and plausible deniability. Now your days are quiet, and your nights are more peaceful. You eat when you can, sleep in places even the rats avoid, and carry everything you own in the folds of your cloak, including a blade that's slightly bent but sentimental. You got it from a guard who tripped during a festival and never got up again. You didn't kill him. Someone else did. Probably. You don't ask questions anymore. Forget everything you've heard about assassins being graceful and mysterious. You're tired, underpaid, and allergic to hay. Half your disguises don't fit, and the other half smell like someone else's bad luck. The last time you tried to sneak into a feast, you got mistaken for the latrine boy and spent 3 hours carrying buckets before realizing your target had already left. Your pay? Always half now. Half will find you later. You've learned that later often means a blade in the back, or someone else collecting your cut. So you take what you can and vanish. Quickly, quietly, with just enough dignity to not trip over your cloak.
The targets aren't easy.
They're never easy. You don't get asked to handle local drunks or the neighbor who sings off-key at dawn. No, you get nobles with 12 guards, rotating bedrooms, and food testers who take their jobs too seriously. You climb walls, listen through doors, bribe servants, memorize footsteps. Then you wait. For the window, the breath, the moment when no one's watching. If you're lucky, no one screams. If you're fortunate, no one even notices. And if you're truly blessed, you leave with your payment, your life, and nothing that needs hiding in the woods behind the stables. But that's rare. Some nights you wonder who you used to be. A farmer? A son? Someone with jokes and a full name? Now you're just a whisper. A glance. A flicker in the torchlight no one can quite place. You don't stay anywhere too long. Don't drink too much. Don't ask questions. You listen. You watch. You disappear. Tonight, there's a name in your boot, a purse in your sleeve, and a castle down the road where a baron sleeps behind 3 locked doors and 1 very nervous goose. Your only plan involves a monk's robe, a crate of onions, and a rope that may or may not hold your weight. But it's a living. Because in this world, you don't kill for justice. You kill because no one else will. And when your luck runs out, because it will, it won't be in a blaze of glory. It'll be quiet, forgotten, and possibly involving goats. You weren't born for this. No one is. There was no ominous prophecy, no glowing dagger that chose you. You didn't train under candlelight in a distant monastery while whispering ancient oaths into the night. No, your path to assassination began the usual way, by getting fired from your 3rd straight job for stealing a carrot that was technically already rotting. It started with desperation. Hunger doesn't ask for permission. It just sharpens your instincts and lowers your standards. When someone offered you 2 silver coins to deal with a situation, you said yes before hearing about the situation. Spoiler, it was a guy, a big one, and he had friends. You didn't exactly succeed, but you didn't die, and for some reason, that was enough. Word got around. You became that one who's quiet and didn't get caught, which, in medieval terms, is practically a diploma. There's a myth that people become assassins because they're fearless. The truth? You were terrified. Still are. Every job is a coin flip. Heads you get paid, tails you get stabbed, and sometimes the coin is rigged. What kind of person does this? Well, here's a fun game. Walk into any tavern and look for the ones who sit with their backs to the wall. Who never drinks too much? Who knows 3 exit routes even if there's only 1 door? That's your answer. People who've been backed into corners so many times have started living in. Maybe you were a deserter, or a thief who got too good. Perhaps you were just invisible. Someone nobody missed, nobody owed, nobody expected much from. And in a world where being poor makes you forgettable, that forgettability becomes your most marketable skill. Of course, you had to learn a few things, like how to walk without echo, how to breathe through a wall. How do you tell the difference between a guard asleep and one pretending because he gets paid extra for catching people like you? And then there's poison. Oh, poison. The glamorous tool of the refined killer, according to bad poetry and worse plays. You once tried making your own, mixing nightshade with old wine and a pinch of salt, because someone swore salt helped. It did not. The target burped twice, asked for seconds, and then proposed to the barmaid. You, meanwhile, hid behind a barrel and reevaluated every choice you've ever made. You learned quickly that nothing about this job is elegant. You carry your gear wrapped in rags, not velvet. Your maps are badly drawn rumors. Your plans change every 10 minutes, usually because of chickens. You've gotten very good at thinking on your feet, especially when those feet are dangling out a second-story window, and someone below is shouting, "Hey, that's not Father Benedict!" Sometimes you try to remember what a typical day looks like, waking up without checking the ceiling for loose beams or listening for the sound of boots on gravel, and going to sleep without hiding a knife under your hay mattress, and laughing without wondering who's watching. It's hard. It's not impossible, but it's hard. And that's the worst part. Every once in a while, you remember you used to be a person. You used to have plans. Not good ones, perhaps, but dreams all the same. A plot of land. A warm hearth. Maybe someone who didn't immediately check their pockets of job swearing are hugging you. But now your reality is alleyways, back rooms, unmarked doors, and coded messages. You measure time in job offers and bruises. You measure trust in half sentences and sideways glances. And if anyone gets too close, you leave. Not because you want to, because you have to. You're not a monster. Monsters are loud, obvious, and flamboyant. You're something worse. You're necessary. To people in power, you're a tool. A whisper, a risk they're willing to take, until you become one they can't afford. And yet, you keep going because the alternative is starvation, because you're good at this, even if it makes your stomach turn. Because in some twisted, awful way, being feared is better than being forgotten. So when the following message comes, burned around the edges, sealed with wax, no name, you don't hesitate. You read. You pack. You vanish. And once again, you become the shadow. No one notices until someone becomes mysteriously dead. After all, you never planned to be here. But the world didn't give you another option. And now that you're here, you're going to do it better than anyone else. There's no school for this, no orientation scroll, no wise old mentor who patiently shows you how to garrote someone with a bootlace while whispering something philosophical like, "Strike not the man, but the moment." You learned the hard way, by doing everything wrong and living long enough to regret it. You forgot about the dogs the first time you tried climbing into a manor window. The second time, you remembered the dogs but forgot your dagger. The third time, you brought the dagger, avoided the dogs, and stepped directly onto a sleeping servant. They screamed. You screamed. Everyone screamed. You still don't know how you got away. Possibly witchcraft. Possibly divine pity. This job doesn't come with instructions. It comes with scars. You learn not to wear anything that jingles. You know which floorboards creak, which staircases betray you, and which vegetables make the least noise when you land in a kitchen garden. If you're lucky, you might pick up tricks from others in the trade, but most of them are as trusting as you are, and just as likely to vanish without saying goodbye. The only advice you ever got was from a limping smuggler with one eye and no eyebrows. He said, "If you're not sure what's in the soup, don't eat the soup." You've lived by that ever since. Your education is trial and error, heavy on the error. You once confused sleeping powder with dried fish scales. Instead of putting your mark to sleep, you gave him what historians would call an aggressive rash and 5 hours of interpretive dancing. He lived. You fled. You still avoid that town.
Then there's poison. Everyone's favorite method until they try it.
Making it is part alchemy, part guesswork, and mostly praying that you didn't mix up belladonna with parsley again. One memorable attempt had you poisoning your hand by accident, which resulted in a dramatic fainting spell in front of a bishop, a statue, and several deeply unimpressed geese. Nobody trains you to hide. You figure it out on your own. Empty barrels, hay bales, priest robes, manure piles, some more comfortable than others. You've spent an entire afternoon disguised as a thatched roof repairman, holding the same straw bundle for hours and nodding thoughtfully at the sky every time someone passed by. You don't learn swordplay, you learn speed, discretion. When to run, when to kneel, when to fake a coughing fit until the guards walk away. You're not a warrior. You're an inconvenience with good instincts. Your best asset isn't strength or agility or even stealth. You can look like nothing, like a servant, a scribe, or a stable boy who happens to be walking a bit too quietly near the royal bedchamber. And yet, you survive. Not because you're better than anyone else, but because you made more mistakes early on. You learned from them, and now you know. Never touch the floor near the chapel after midnight. Always bribe the kitchen maid. And if you see a nobleman smiling at dinner, leave. Something is about to explode. There are no trophies, no degrees, just the silent pride of not dying. Just the satisfaction of hearing your name in a whisper and realizing they're not talking about your funeral. Not yet. You once met a retired assassin. Retired is a generous word. He'd taken an arrow to the leg and now sold cabbage. He said the worst part of this job wasn't the danger. It was the boredom between the threats. The hours spent waiting in silence, pressed into a wall, heart pounding, while nothing happened. Waiting for the scream, the clatter, the footsteps. And when it didn't come, you exhaled and did it all again. You didn't argue. You just nodded, bought a cabbage, and moved on. Because in this world, the only test that matters is the one you take every time you step out of the shadows. There are no graduates in your profession, only survivors. And you're still here. Coin is a beautiful lie. It jingles like a promise and shines enough to make you forget that betrayal is cheaper than loyalty. In your line of work, payment is never just about silver. Whether you'll live long enough to spend it or end up face down in a pig trough while someone else pockets the other half. The first time someone paid you, it felt like a victory. A little cloth pouch, tied with twine, tossed your way by a man who refused to make eye contact. Half up front, he said. Half after. You believed him. You also believed the stew that night was just stew. Turns out, both were lies. He vanished, of course. Or so you thought until you spotted him 2 weeks later at a market stall, buying pears and laughing like he hadn't sent you to assassinate a cousin who turned out to be armed, armored, and remarkably awake. You considered confronting him. Then you remembered. You're the kind of person people pay to avoid confrontations. The truth is, most clients don't want a relationship. They want deniability. If they could send a raven with a knife attached, they would. But instead, they find people like you, with no last name, family, or address. If things go south, you're not a liability. You're just another story. A warning. A problem that solved a different problem before becoming one themselves. You've learned never to trust someone who smiles too much while explaining, "This one's easy." Easy means they don't expect you back. Easy means they're already preparing a backup plan in case your luck runs out, or they decide to speed it along. That's why now, you count your coins the second they hit your hand. You test their weight, bite the edge, and check for trick metals. Because yes, fake coins are a thing. You've been paid in tin, wood, and once, a hollowed-out loaf of bread with 5 coppers baked inside. You ate around them. It wasn't even good bread. Sometimes, you try to haggle. That rarely ends well. One noblewoman offered you a ruby the size of your thumbnail. You were suspicious, naturally. It turned out it was real. So was the curse attached to it. You gave it to a traveling merchant and wished him luck. A week later, his donkey exploded. No further questions. Then there's the noble who promised land. A plot of your own, he said. Quiet, secluded, yours. He failed to mention it was in a swamp inhabited by 4 witches, 3 ex-wives, and a family of aggressively territorial geese. You lasted 2 nights before running barefoot into the forest, clutching a ladle and shouting apologies to a tree you swear blinked at you. And even when the job goes smoothly, even when the client honors the deal, it's never enough. Not for the risk. Not for the blood. Not for the creeping rot of what you've become. You walk away with coins in your hand and stains on your soul that no amount of wine or prayer can scrub out. You've also learned to spot traps disguised as contracts, political setups dressed in silk. The time you were asked to eliminate a dangerous rebel and arrived to find a man with no weapons, no army, just a scribe's hands and a face that looked like your father's. You left him alive, and for weeks, you waited for the knock on your door that never came. Maybe they knew. Perhaps they didn't care. Someone else did it later better. Other jobs are more personal. One time, a man hired you to take out his brother. They said it was about inheritance. You arrived, listened, and realized the brother was the good one. So you took the payment, lied, and moved on. You still feel the weight of that coin pouch. Not guilt. Not exactly. It's just the memory of someone who thought you were justice when you barely qualify as stealthy misfortune. You've been double-crossed so often. It's part of the process. Step 1. Accept the job. Step 2. Do the job. Step 3. Run like the client might be following you with a crossbow. And if they're not, assume someone else is. So now you demand payment up front. Full. In coin, not favors. You never accept "you'll be taken care of" as a valid phrase because in your world, taken care of is often followed by buried discreetly behind the stables. You check for escape routes, even while they're paying you. Smile politely, nod, say things like, "It'll be done," or "Consider it handled," while mentally rehearsing how to leap through the nearest window if they reach for a second coin pouch that might contain a dagger or a contract with your name on it. This job doesn't pay in wealth. It pays in survival, in the fact that, for one more night, you can eat hot food and sleep indoors without someone shouting your name in accusation. And even then, you sleep with one eye open. Because in this business, money talks, and sometimes it says goodbye. In the stories, assassins always seem to have impressive gear. Daggers that gleam, blades that fold into their sleeves, crossbows that whisper instead of click, and boots that defy all physics. In reality, you once tried to make your smoke bomb using dried mushrooms and almost asphyxiated yourself in a hayloft. It was not your proudest moment. Your arsenal looks more like the lost and found box at a particularly sketchy inn. You've got a crooked dagger that rattles ominously when you walk too fast, a rope that may have previously belonged to a suspiciously thin cow, and a slingshot fashioned from leather strips and optimism. The most sophisticated item you possess is a brass ring you use to fake nobility when needed. You found it on a corpse. He didn't seem to mind. No weapons master is handing you elegant tools with meaningful nods. Your gear comes from tavern floors, unattended saddlebags, and the occasional opportunity where no one's watching the equipment shed during a storm. If it's sharp, blunt, or throwable, it's fair game. If it doesn't kill you during practice, it's even better. You once tried to carry 2 daggers. Looked cool, until you bent over, and one slid down your boot, slicing your ankle, and you had to complete a mission limping and bleeding into your sock. Now you carry just one. It's mainly because it's all you can afford and fits inside a hollowed-out bread loaf for discreet travel. Poison is another beast entirely. Everyone assumes you sprinkle it into wine like a disappointed sommelier. But no, you must find the right ingredients, dry them properly, and mix them with the correct ratios. Mess it up, and your target doesn't die. They vomit on you, scream for help, and now you're the suspicious stranger covered in stew and shame. You once acquired a rare poison from a traveler who swore it could stop a bear. He was right, but only if the bear was deeply allergic to beetroot and sneezed itself into a heart attack. You tested it on a rat. The rat turned purple and got angrier. That rat now guards one of your safe houses. Bows are great, if you have one, and if you can afford arrows. You stole one once from a guard who left it leaning against a tree while relieving himself. You got 5 glorious days with it before it snapped mid-mission and launched your only arrow directly into a wall tapestry. The noble still talks about the ghost who attacked his drapery. You've tried Garotus. Messy. Slow. It is effective if used correctly, but you once wrapped it the wrong way and nearly strangled yourself while the target watched in total confusion. He still tipped you afterward out of pity. Most of your success relies not on weapons, but on improvisation. The heavy candlestick. The blunt ladle. A loaf of bread that's gone slightly stale and is now functionally a brick. You once took down a guard using only a spoon in sheer panic. Another time you kicked over a bucket of eels, and in the chaos, everyone forgot you were even there. You carry what you can hide, and you hide what you can't afford to lose. Your favorite weapon isn't technically a weapon. It's a perfectly folded piece of parchment forged with a noble's seal. It saved your life more than your blade, especially when someone catches you sneaking around, and you need to be Sir Elric of somewhere very far away suddenly. You dream of better gear sometimes. A real dagger with a proper grip, a belt that doesn't squeak, boot boots that fit. But dreams don't kill barons. Quiet desperation does. And in the end, it's not the tool that matters. It's the moment. A clear path, a slow breath, a flick of the wrist. You don't need elegance. You need results. So you press your bent blade into your boot, adjust your fraying cloak, and walk into the dark once more, armed with nothing but what you've scrounged and survived. Because in this profession, your best weapon has always been you, slightly under-equipped. You'd think, after everything, that the hard part of assassination would be the killing, the actual act, slipping the blade, losing the arrow, pouring just the right amount of suspicious liquid into someone's evening ale. But no, that's the easy bit. The real challenge is everything before that moment. Getting in, staying unseen, and getting out without becoming the feature presentation on tomorrow's execution schedule. Because let's face it, your targets aren't living in wooden shacks with leaky roofs and goats for roommates. No, they live in castles. Thick-walled, guard-packed, paranoia-designed castles. Places where every door creaks, every torch flickers too loudly, and every corridor feels like it ends in an armed man with something to prove. Your typical noble isn't stupid. Arrogant, yes. Suspicious, always. But not stupid. They sleep behind iron locks, eat only after food tasters finish twitching, and rotate sleeping chambers like they play medieval musical chairs. You could spend 2 weeks learning the castle layout only to find they've swapped bedrooms because their astrologer had a weird dream involving owls and cabbage. Guards are the obvious obstacle. You can't bribe all of them. You tried once. It nearly worked. Until one drunk soldier decided he wanted a bonus and dragged you to the barracks like a prize rabbit. You escaped by setting the laundry on fire. Nobody expected that. Not even you. Some guards are alert. Others are asleep with their helmets askew and half a cheese wheel in their lap. You learn to recognize the difference by their snoring patterns. You know a lot. Which guard is left-handed, which one limps, flirts with the kitchen maid, and disappears for long bread runs every evening. That's your window. That's your chance. And then, of course, there are the dogs. You hate the dogs. Not all of them. Just the ones bred specifically to detect people like you. The silent ones. The sneaky ones. The ones who smell like wet boots and moral ambiguity. You tried making friends with one. It barked once, then bit you in a place you still walk differently because of. So, you've adapted. You carry dried meat in your pouch. Not for you, for the animals. You whisper nice things to guard dogs as you pass. You're a good boy. Please don't alert the crossbow guy. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you run. Getting inside the castle is only step one. Once you're in, it's a labyrinth of echoing halls, unpredictable nobles, and staff who always appear when you're trying to do something discreet. You've hidden behind tapestries, under tables, and inside wardrobes that smelled of lavender and trauma. Servants are a wild card. Some will help you, for coin, revenge, or the simple pleasure of causing trouble. Others will scream loud enough to summon the entire garrison. And sometimes, it's hard to tell which is which until it's too late. The staff talks. Gossip spreads faster than the plague. They'll know if you're even a second too clumsy, too strange, too unknown. Have you seen that new stable boy? The one who doesn't blink and keeps adjusting his boot? Suddenly, you're being invited to meet the captain of the guard. You don't want that invitation. You decline. Violently, if necessary. And the nobles themselves? Paranoid doesn't begin to cover it. They sleep with daggers under their pillows, build escape tunnels into their bedchambers, and train their servants to recognize poison by smell, color, and general vibes. You once had to abort an entire mission because the steward noticed the wine looked slightly too enthusiastic. Sometimes they don't even sleep in their beds. They swap rooms, use decoys, and leave shoes under false beds to confuse assassins. And it works. You've spent more than one night perched over a sleeping form, only to discover it's a pile of pillows, some hay, and a wig made from horsehair. Feasts are the worst. With so many people, it'd be easier to disappear. But no. There are jesters, there are performers, there are wandering eyes and watchful lords who know precisely what not belonging looks like. You once disguised yourself as a servant and spent the entire night pouring wine for a bishop who kept calling you boy and insisting you smile more. You smiled, then you left, without completing the job. Because sometimes, the risk outweighs the reward. And then, there's the escape. Getting in is hard. Getting out is art. You can't retrace your steps. By the time you've finished, the alarm's likely been raised. Every hallway becomes a trap. Every door is a gamble. You learn to find exits where none were meant to be. Out through the kitchen chimney, down a rope from the tower, crawling through a drain that smelled like noble guilt and expired fish. If you're lucky, you make it out with your coin and your conscience somewhat intact. If not, well, at least you've memorized the moat's path. Because when you're an assassin, you don't just plan how to kill. You plan how to disappear before anyone realizes you were ever there. Forget the romantic image of the assassin in sleek black robes, with the hood drawn just enough to be mysterious, but not so much as to trip over furniture. Your wardrobe is not chosen for drama. It's selected for not smelling worse than yesterday's goat stall. And even that is a stretch most days. Your disguise? It's not a disguise. It's just what you already look like. Grimy, forgettable, slightly hunched from bad beds and worse decisions. In the grand game of medieval hide-and-seek, the best costume is poverty. No one suspects the dirty guy carrying firewood. They assume he works here, and for once, that assumption keeps you alive. You've worn everything. Stable boy rags, monk robes with suspicious wine stains, merchant cloaks with pockets sewn on at a desperate angle. Once, you even tied an onion to your belt, because someone said that's what farmers do. No idea if that's true. But it made you smell honest. Or at least distracted from the poison vial under your tunic. Tailors do not make clothes for people in your line of work. You stitch things yourself poorly. You patch holes with bits of old curtain, leather scraps, or whatever fabric you can steal without setting off a chase scene. Your colors never match. Your sleeves never sit right. But you blend in like a bad smell. And that's a compliment in this world. Masks. Masks are for plays and cowards. The only time you wore one, it fogged up your vision, made your breathing louder, and caused a toddler to scream so violently you nearly got arrested. Now you stick with the universal disguise. Don't make eye contact. Walk like you belong, and always carry something heavy. Nobody questions a man with a purpose, even if that purpose is made up on the spot. When questioned, you lie like it's a language you were born into. I'm Brother Matthias, sent by the Abbey to repair the bell tower. I'm delivering spices to the steward's cousin's wedding. I'm a distant relative of Lady Margaret's cheese supplier. Are these lies convincing? Not really. Do they work? Shockingly often. Especially if you mumble. Servants are trained to ignore. Nobles are taught to assume. And guards? Guards rarely look twice at the guy carrying firewood and muttering about deadlines. You've passed through entire keeps dressed as a drunk shepherd looking for his sheep, and only once did someone ask where your sheep was. You answered inside, and they let you go. Never explain more than necessary. Of course, disguises come with risk. Wear the wrong thing in the bad part of the castle, and suddenly, you're carrying chamber pots you didn't mean to. You once got stuck in character for 6 hours because no one told you the steward's assistant had just died of the plague. And now, you were him. You even got yelled at for mixing up the betting schedule. You smiled, nodded, and escaped through the laundry chute. Women's clothes? Don't laugh. One time, you escaped execution by dressing as a nun. A very tall, suspiciously broad nun. Did it work? Technically, yes. Did it raise questions? Also yes. But nobody questioned the dagger because they were too busy being offended by your beard under the wimple. You have no time for vanity. Hair unkempt, face smeared, hands calloused, each one a tool in the art of being unremarkable. Once, someone said, "I could swear I've seen you before," and you replied, "No, you haven't." End of conversation. The less memorable you are, the better. You're a background detail in someone else's life, and that's how you survive. If you stand out, you die. That's the rule. Wear something too clean, and people assume you're essential. Important people get noticed. I noticed people get remembered. And remember, people get hunted. So you dress like a nobody. Because nobodies can slip through doors, blend into kitchens, and walk past guards carrying a bucket of soapy water and a dagger in the lining of their tunic. Your only fashion statement is, "Please forget I was ever here." There are no team meetings in your profession. No coded letters from headquarters. No sly nods from comrades across crowded plazas. You don't have a handler feeding you missions or a sidekick with a crossbow waiting in the shadows. There is no we. There's just you, your dagger, and the whispering paranoia that maybe, just maybe, someone else has been paid to deal with you. Assassins don't make friends. Not because they're heartless, but because people tend to vanish after getting too close. Some are bought, some are caught, some get curious, and curiosity in this business is as safe as juggling torches in a hayloft. Every person you trust is a potential liability, and every liability is a possible end. You tried once early on. There was a fellow who called himself the Fox. He claimed he'd worked in 3 kingdoms and had fake documents for every profession, from falconer to funeral priest. You believed him. You worked one job together. It went well. He made you laugh. A week later, you found him slumped against a wall, his smile still frozen and a dagger in his chest. Not yours, but it might as well have been. You buried him with your bare hands and haven't laughed with anyone since. From that day forward, you learned to work alone. No names, no attachments, no asking where someone's from or where they're headed next. If you cross paths with another assassin, you nod. Let's share a drink, but never more than a sentence, never more than one night. Because in this trade, colleagues are ghosts, and ghosts don't linger. Even criminals avoid you. Thieves, smugglers, con men, they all talk. They joke. They share secrets and stew. But not with you. Because you don't just steal or lie. You disappear people. That makes you unnerving, dangerous. Worse, it makes you a target. If the business gets bad and someone decides to turn you in, it is worth a pardon. Inns are the loneliest places of all. You sit in the darkest corner, back to the wall, cup half full, head down. You listen, not because you care, but because listening keeps you alive. You know which lords are feuding, which guards are drinking, and which steward is losing money. But no one knows you. If anyone asks your name, you give a different one every time. Thomas, Hugh, Brother Lynn. No one important. And it's true. You are no one. You sleep lightly, never in the same bed twice, never without checking the window latch, the door hinge, or the floorboard creak. You've perfected the art of vanishing before sunrise. You leave no notes, no items, no trace. The innkeeper remembers a quiet man who paid in a coin that smelled like fire and left behind nothing but flattened straw. Love, that's the most dangerous fantasy of all. You once let someone in, just for a night, someone kind who didn't flinch when you moved too quickly. who smiled at your silences instead of trying to fill them. For one moment, you almost let your guard down. You left before morning. Left them a pouch of coins and a forged note from a traveling merchant. Safer that way. For them. For you. Because the people you care about become targets, or worse, leverage. Sometimes, you envy soldiers. They fight beside others. They die for a cause. You kill quietly, alone, for people who won't even remember your name. If you die, no one mourns. Maybe a stable boy finds your body. Perhaps someone uses your cloak for firewood. That's your legacy. Disposable, forgettable, silent. But here's the irony. You're surrounded by people constantly. In marketplaces, in feasts, in courtly gatherings. You brush shoulders with princes and peasants alike. You sit at banquet tables, pour wine and scrub floors. But you're invisible. I always watched, never watched. And it's in those moments, crowds roaring, music swelling, the loneliness screams the loudest. Still, you prefer it this way. Because in this world, companionship is a luxury you can't afford. Not when every smile might be a mask. Not when every voice might carry your name to someone with a purse full of silver and a sharp piece of steel. So you keep walking, keep quiet, keep alone. Because if you've forgotten, you're safe. And if you're safe, you get to see another morning. Failure, in most lines of work, means you get a stern talking to, lose your job, and drown your sorrows in a warm ale and a soft loaf of bread. In your profession, failure means ropes, fire, a crowd, and someone with a thunderous voice, shouting exactly what you did wrong while you dangle above the square. You don't get second chances. There are no performance reviews. Just one shot, one moment, one strike that must land. And if it doesn't, you don't walk away with regret. You get dragged away in pieces. That's the brutal math of your trade, precision or punishment. You still remember the first time you froze. The mark turned around too fast. I looked you in the eye, just a boy, maybe 17. You'd climbed into the chamber and crept toward the bed, every step rehearsed. And then he sat up, said, "Are you lost?" in a casual voice that nearly knocked the dagger from your hand. You didn't kill him. You ran. And 2 days later, there was a drawing of your face on every post and gate from here to the Riverlands. It was not a good drawing, granted. You looked more like an angry duck, but it was enough to ruin your season. Failure doesn't just end the job. It turns the hunter into prey. Once your mark knows someone came for them, everything changes. Security triples, gates lock tighter, servants whisper, nobles panic and hire mercenaries with shiny armor and questionable morals. And you go underground. Sometimes. Sewers become your safe house. Rats your roommates. Worse still is the fallout. Clients don't appreciate embarrassment. If your slip-up makes them look bad, they're not just unhappy, but furious. And in this world, nothing travels faster than a noble's bruised ego. Suddenly, you're not just unpaid, you're a loose end. And loose ends get snipped, usually by someone like you, who is only better dressed and less tired. Then there's the court. Not the noble kind, the justice kind. Trials are rare, the spectacle is familiar. If they catch you, there's no quiet cell, no mercy. You're paraded like a cursed trophy. Face bruised, clothes torn, surrounded by guards who'd rather hit you than feed you. The crowd gathers early, eager for the theater. Executioners know how to put on a show. They name the crime, name the victim, name the price. Then they name you, loudly, repeatedly. And the crowd cheers, not because they care, but because you're not them. They need someone to boo, someone to blame for the fear crawling under their skin at night. You're perfect for the role. Some executions are quick, a sword, an axe. Others are less so. They want you to serve as a lesson, a warning. That's the point. To show what happens to shadows that slip and fall into the light. You've watched one before, not by choice. Someone else's failure, someone you vaguely knew. They caught her trying to poison a duke's wine. She hesitated. He didn't. The guards found her in the pantry, sobbing, blade still in her boot. You couldn't help. You couldn't even flinch because flinching gets noticed. And being noticed gets you next. Sometimes failure isn't even your fault. The guards changed schedules. The servant you bribed got cold feet. The wind howled at the wrong moment. But no one cares. Results are what matter. Success is silent. Failure is very, very loud. And then there's the worst failure of all. The one no one sees, but you. You missed. You hesitated. You let them live. And now you carry that memory like a wound. Not deep, but permanent. You wonder if they remember your face, if they tell the story, if they think you spared them, or just messed up. You hope they believe it was mercy. It wasn't. You didn't want to die that night. So now, every mission is soaked in that awareness. Every footstep is weighed, every breath is measured. You double-check the blade, triple-check the door, count the guards, count the exits, count your heartbeats. Because you failed once. And you know what's waiting if it happens again. Your days are empty. Not quite empty. They move without direction, comfort, or anything resembling what most people call a life. There are no plans, appointments, or see you tomorrow. Only motion. You walk, you watch, you wait. Always waiting. For the next job, the next name, the next excuse to pretend you matter. You wake up wherever your body gave up the night before. Maybe under a car, maybe in a hayloft, maybe in an abandoned cellar that smells like wine, mold, and secrets that should have stayed buried. You stretch your back and check your pockets before anything else to ensure you haven't been robbed or, worse, hired in your sleep. No breakfast, no routine, just survival. You drift through towns like fog. You study faces, not to know them, but to remember who not to become. You're a shadow among bakers, blacksmiths, fishwives, and gamblers. They live in the sun, complain about taxes, and argue over cheese prices. You nod and smile when needed, but you're not one of them. You're something that exists beside them, unseen, unclaimed. Sometimes to pass the time, you pretend you're someone else, a tailor's apprentice, a traveler heading home, a scholar with a map and bad handwriting. You sit at a tavern table and answer questions no one asks. You hum a tune you never learned. You hold your cup like it contains meaning. Then you leave before anyone can call your bluff. Your belongings fit in a sack smaller than your regrets. A cloak, a blade, ephemeral body, some coins, a fake letter of reference from a noble who never existed. You carry your whole world on your back, and it weighs less than the memory of the first person you ever killed. You don't speak unless necessary. Your voice is a risk, too familiar, too distinct, someone might remember it. So instead, you nod, you listen, you vanish. You've eaten more stolen bread than fresh. You've bathed in rainwater and streams and once in a barrel behind a tavern while the cook was distracted. You don't care about comfort anymore. Only invisibility. Only motion. You sit in dark corners. Not because they're dramatic, but because no one looks there. You study who comes and goes. Who drinks too fast. Who talks too loud. You read lips like a priest reads sin, quietly and without forgiveness. People tell stories in taverns. They don't know you're listening. They laugh about who got caught, who got away, who got married. You laugh too when it fits. You're good at timing now. Even your fake laughs have rhythm. You once tried to make conversation. Just once. A merchant woman asked if you were traveling far. You said yes. Then she asked where you were from. And the silence that followed was louder than any scream. You left before finishing your drink. You no longer remember what your real name sounds like. It's been overwritten by many others. Aliases, lies, borrowed identities. If someone called it out right now in a crowded room, you might not turn around. Or worse, you might. You live through habits, counting steps, watching shadows, noticing how many guards are at the gate today versus yesterday, whether the blacksmith's apprentice seems nervous, whether the local drunk has stopped drinking, because that usually means he's sobered up enough to recognize people. Trust doesn't exist here, not even in yourself. You question every instinct and double-check every path. You've walked away from more jobs than you've taken, because something felt off. A glance too long, a silence too deep, a door too conveniently left ajar. Even your reflections feel false now. Sometimes you catch yourself in a window or a puddle and flinch, like seeing a stranger wearing your bones. You touch your face to remember it's still yours. If you're lucky, you find a place to lie down at night. Something sheltered, something dark. You curl up, blade within reach, eyes half open. And if sleep comes, it comes in fragments. Images of fire, of rope, of hands reaching. And always, always, that face you failed to forget. You don't dream of better days anymore. You dream of empty roads, of silence without tension. of not having to check the sound of every footstep behind you. But you wake. You always wake. And that is enough to keep going. People assume survival in your line of work is about skill, precision, timing, control. But that's only part of it. A small part. If you're still breathing after a job, it's not because you're the best. It's because luck forgot to kill you. You fumbled with latches, mistimed your approach, slipped on candle wax, sneezed during a stakeout, and you still somehow made it out. Barely. Scarred. Wiser. Smellier. But alive. You don't understand it. No one does. You keep waking up. You've walked into rooms that should have been trapped. You've stepped over tripwires you didn't see until later. You've leaned on doors that should have been locked and found the Mark snoring with a dagger under his pillow and a plate of cheese beside him. You got the job done, and left before the cheese even got warm. Some call it talent. You call it accident-adjacent fortune. For example, when you were supposed to eliminate a merchant in his sleep, but got the wrong window, and found yourself in a storeroom full of wine. You took 2 bottles, left an apology in bad Latin, and somehow got credited with solving an entirely different problem for a rival house, and paid double. I still don't know what that was about. Then there was the job where your rope broke halfway down the wall. Should have shattered your spine. Instead, you landed in a manure cart being pushed by a drunk farmer who thought you were a hallucination and offered you a turnip. You still have that turnip. You don't know why. You've dodged arrows, escaped dogs, ducked guards, and once rolled under a dining table just in time to avoid a sword meant for someone else. You didn't even know the sword was coming. You were trying to steal a biscuit. Your life is a collection of near misses strung together by blind chance and bad decisions with surprisingly good outcomes. Like the job that required you to poison a goblet, but the cups got switched, and you accidentally saved the Mark's life by killing his cousin instead. Everyone applauded. You bowed, then ran. The worst part? You've watched better assassins die. Smarter ones. Stronger. People who planned better climbed faster and struck cleaner. People who read maps. People who didn't trip on loose cobblestones or sneeze around cats. And yet they're gone. And you're still here, somehow. Breathing. Eating and making the same mistakes with slightly more flair. It gives you a strange kind of guilt. Survivor's guilt, maybe? Or is it just the creeping suspicion that your continued existence is a cosmic accident, and no one's corrected it? You don't take pride in it. You don't feel invincible. You think unearned. You've developed rituals now, habits, little superstitions that make no sense but help you pretend you're in control. 3 knots in the belt, a coin flipped before entering, left foot first on staircases. You once failed to do the coin flip and got stuck inside a well for 7 hours. Coincidence? Maybe. But you're not skipping it again. And deep down, you know one day your luck will end. That's the nature of luck. It doesn't warn you when it's over. It just leaves the room and suddenly the floorboard creaks. The guard turns around, and the blade meant for someone else finds your ribs instead. But until that day, you keep going. You keep bluffing. Keep betting your life on hunches, half-truths, and poorly tied ropes, because there's nothing else to do. Because you don't know how to stop. Because even when you try to walk away, the silence doesn't feel safe, it feels suspicious. And maybe there's something poetic about surviving by accident. Knowing the world is chaos, you've learned how to dance with it. Badly, clumsily, and sometimes backward. But it's still a dance. And you're still on your feet. There's no time off in your profession, no sabbaticals, paid holidays, or warm mornings where you stretch luxuriously and decide to take the day slowly. The job doesn't end when the blade lands or the door closes behind you. Because after every kill, there's one more shadow behind you than before. You are constantly being hunted. Maybe not immediately. Sometimes it takes weeks. Sometimes it's days. But eventually someone starts asking questions. Why did Lord Halric die with no visible wound? Who tampered with the wine? Who was that monk who didn't know the name of the abbey cat? And when those questions begin, the game flips. You're not the knife in the dark anymore. You're the stain they're trying to scrub out of the story. You've learned to move constantly. You never sleep in the same place twice. Not just out of habit, but necessity. Because if someone follows the trail long enough, they'll find the burnt candle stub, the broken floorboard, and the servant who remembers a man who never blinked. And then they'll find you. Or worse, they'll find someone who looks like you and make an example out of them, just in case. Even resting becomes a risk. You've trained yourself to nap in bursts, 15 minutes at a time, ears open, hand on hilt. One eye pretends to sleep while the other scans the room for movement. You once awoke to find someone standing over you, a child, thankfully, just trying to sell you old berries. You bought the berries. I ate them all, even the slightly blue one. Every tavern feels like a trap. Every marketplace echoes with footsteps that don't match the rhythm. Every creaking door, every unexpected cough, it could be them. Someone seeking revenge, or coin, or both. You've had your likeness described in enough wanted posters to know precisely how poorly artists remember noses. But the outfit, the weapon, the walk, that's harder to fake. You don't trust peace anymore. It feels too much like bait. You remember when you tried to settle for just a week. It's a quiet town. A rented room above a baker who made excellent apple bread. You even tried smiling at people, making small talk, pretending the dagger under your cloak was just for wolves. But on the fourth day you saw a cloaked figure outside the window. Then another, on the roof across the square. You left before dawn without saying goodbye. You didn't even take the bread. You've made enemies. Some obvious, others subtle. Nobles whose heirs now sleep with a guard at the door. Merchants who lost more than just rivals. Spy masters who didn't appreciate you stealing their thunder. And then there are the ones you've never met, seen, or heard of, but who know your name anyway.
You've heard rumors of guilds,
Groups. Networks of assassins who watch out for one another. If they exist, they've never sent you a welcome letter. Or maybe they did, and it was poisoned. Either way, you're alone. Sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted, without even realizing it. You once walked into a job thinking it was a standard kill. The mark was unarmed. Sleeping. Too easy. You hesitated. That hesitation saved your life. The mark was bait. The room was set up, and the door was rigged with a bell to alert the guards just one floor below. You escaped through the chimney, coughing, burned, furious, but alive. Since then, you assume every job is a trap until proven otherwise. You test the wine. You ask questions that don't seem like questions. You watch the client's hands as they speak. Because nothing says double cross, like a casual reach toward a drawer mid-negotiation. This life doesn't let you exhale. Not fully. Even your dreams are laced with footsteps, torches, the sound of chains. You wake up sweating, hand clenched around nothing. Once you shouted in your sleep. You don't remember what. But the next morning, the man sleeping 2 bunks over was gone. Just a cup of tea left behind. Still warm. And yet you keep going. Despite the paranoia, the exhaustion, and the nights spent curled in alleys under a blanket that isn't yours. There's clarity in this life. A focus. Every breath matters. Every moment could be the last. And that makes you sharper than ever when you had a bed, a name, a family. You survive by staying alert and never truly relaxing. You survive by running faster, hiding deeper, stabbing quicker, and vanishing sooner. And someday, maybe, you'll stop running. But not today. Today, you still have breath. And that means someone out there still wants to take it. Every job begins with a lie. Sometimes it's small, like the client saying, "This will be simple." Sometimes it's big, like the promise that you'll be paid in full. Or that there'll be no witnesses. Or that the target isn't the king's cousin with a castle full of angry knights and a dog named Justice. But the biggest lie of all? That you're in control. You're not. You've been lied to in every way imaginable. We just need a message sent. It turns out the message was a severed hand. He'll be alone. He wasn't. There were guards, and a juggler. She won't see it coming. She did. She threw a pie at you, still not sure if that was tactical or personal. Lies are baked into the business like mold in week-old bread. You expect them now. You even appreciate the creativity. A merchant once swore on his late grandmother's grave that the job was legitimate. You later found out he never had a grandmother, just a goat named Nana who, honestly, might have been more trustworthy. It's not that people enjoy deceiving you. It's just that you're disposable. You're a tool, a sharp one, but a means to an end. Once the job's done, you're either a threat or a loose thread. Both are inconvenient. And there's nothing nobles hate more than inconvenience. You've learned to listen closely, not to what's said but to what isn't. A pause before a promise. It's a twitch when they say clean job. The way someone offers too much gold too quickly, like they're trying to bribe their conscience. Those are the jobs that end in betrayal, or fire, usually both. You once took a contract where the client handed you a map, instructions, and a pouch of coins so generous it jingled in harmony. You should have known. Nobody pays that well unless they're planning to kill you before dessert. You did the job anyway. Curiosity, boredom, foolishness. When you returned for payment, you were greeted by 5 archers, 2 guards, and a priest already reciting your last rites. You escaped through a drainage pipe and haven't eaten lamb stew since. The priest was surprisingly fast. Even your contacts, those middlemen who bring the contracts, whisper names, and pretend they're your friend, lie too. Not out of malice, out of habit, because that's what this world is built on. Plausible deniability. Oh, I didn't know they'd try to stab you. Oh, I didn't realize the building was on fire when I sent you in. Oh, I thought the Duke was already dead. Silly me. You once caught a scribe forging your handwriting on a second contract under your name. He said it was just in case. You said nothing. He now signs with his left hand. And then there are the fake contracts, political traps. Someone hires you to kill a noble who turns out to be bait, not just guarded, paraded. You're set up to fail, caught on purpose, publicly tried, and conveniently executed to prove a point. See, they say, we caught the assassin. Justice is served. Never mind that you never stood a chance. You've dodged at least 3, though one involved pretending to be a wandering juggler for 6 days. You can still juggle apples under pressure. It's not useful, but it's deeply amusing. Eventually you stop trusting anything verbally. You insist on written terms. Still coded, still vague, but at least when someone tries to double-cross you, you can wave the parchment and say, "This wasn't the deal," before running for your life. Of course, you've lied too, more than once. You've promised to spare someone and didn't. Promised to vanish and came back. Promised to stay dead, and yet here you are. Lies are the currency of survival. You tell them to others. You ask them to yourself. This is my last job. I'm getting out after this. Just one more. I'll go somewhere warm. I'll sleep in a bed with 4 that doesn't leak. I'll be a farmer. Grow onions, have a dog. You won't believe it. Not really. But you have to say it. Because the only thing worse than being lied to is forgetting how to lie to yourself. You're not the villain. That's the first thing to understand. You don't tie people to millstones or cackle in moonlight. You don't leave calling cards or plot world domination from a lava pit. Villains have flair, vision, backstory. You don't even have a permanent mailing address. But you're not the hero either. Heroes have causes, songs, fans, the occasional shiny sword with a name like Truth Seeker. You have a blade with no hilt, 3 aliases that no one uses, and boots that squeak if you step too fast on the tile. You're not the story. You're the shadow in the margins. You exist in footnotes, in rumors, in odd silences between gossip. Remember Lord Welland, the one who choked on a peach pit, someone says? And someone else murmurs, was it really a peach pit though? That's you. You're the question mark after the official version of events. People don't write legends about your kind. No ballads, no murals, no statues. A woodcut illustration if someone's feeling particularly dramatic. And even then you're drawn hunched, faceless, mid-lunge. A warning more than a character. You've changed history more than once, and no one knows. A prince never returned from his hunting trip. A bishop fell from his tower. A merchant drowned in his fountain. The politics shifted. Treaties collapsed. Wars were narrowly avoided, or ignited, and through it all, your name was never spoken aloud. And honestly, that's the point. Assassins don't seek glory. Glory gets you noticed. Recognition gets you followed. Fame gets you killed. You've watched too many famous blades for hire fall the moment they believe their myth. One slip. One admirer who wanted to see how good you are. One enemy who didn't appreciate being left alive last time. But just because you're not a villain or a hero doesn't mean you're neutral. You've done things. Awful things. Not always by choice. Not always by contract. Sometimes, you made a call because it felt right. Other times, because you had 5 seconds to decide between stabbing a man or being stabbed by him. You've spared people who didn't deserve it. Killed people who maybe did. Once, you accidentally eliminated the wrong man. There were 2 Lord Bennets in the same city. You fled the country for 6 months just to be safe. When you returned, the right Lord Bennet had mysteriously died of food poisoning. You still don't know if that was fate, justice, or just a bad oyster. You've questioned your morality more times than you can count. Are you a murderer? Yes. A mercenary? Absolutely. But a monster? You're not sure. Monsters don't cry after they kill. Monsters don't carry a list of names they regret. Monsters don't bury the coin pouch if the client is worse than the target. But redemption isn't on the table either. You're not deluded. You don't think one good deed erases a lifetime of quiet horror. You want to be left alone. Maybe one day you die in a place where no one's watching, no one's cursing your name, and no one's trying to guess how much you were paid. You once met a bard who swore he could turn anyone's life into a stirring tale. He asked for yours. You laughed. I told him it was mostly stairs and stew. He insisted. You gave him a heavily edited version. He turned it into a ballad called The Silent Fang. You heard it sung once. It made you sound noble, mysterious, tragic. You left the tavern quietly that night and never returned, because it's dangerous to be mistaken for something more than you are, dangerous and lonely. So no, you're not the villain. You're not the hero. You're the part they skip over, the footnote, the ghost in the frame, the one who made the story possible, but never quite belonged. You stopped using your real name a long time ago. Not because it was dangerous, though it was. Not because someone was hunting you, though they probably are. You abandoned it because it didn't fit anymore. Like a shirt from a life that didn't survive the wash. Names have power, they say, which is why yours had to go. You still remember it sometimes. Usually, when you're half asleep in a cold place, or someone calls out a name that sounds almost like it. It hangs in the back of your mind, ghost-like, waiting for you to admit it exists, but you never do. Because if you said it aloud now, it would feel like a betrayal to your survival, to the version of you who clawed their way through the mud and shadow to stay alive one more day. Now you're called many things. Tomas, Gray, Crow, Ash, whatever the moment demands. You've had more aliases than clean meals. Each fits for a while, until someone asks too many questions, a tavern girl gets too curious, or a guard mutters your name during a game of dice, and everyone suddenly stops laughing. So you change again. New town, new name, new story. It's exhausting being a new person every few weeks, but it's safer than being the old one. You wonder sometimes who you were back then, before the silence, before the contracts, before you started introducing yourself with lies so casually that now even you forget they aren't real. Maybe you were kind. Perhaps you were funny. Possibly you had dreams that didn't involve sharp objects and rooftop exits. It doesn't matter. That version of you, because in this world, names can be hunted, tracked, carved into warrants, hung on posters, screamed by grieving relatives or muttered by dying men. But if you have no name, if you're just a shadow in a cloak with a mismatched accent and forgettable face, then maybe you survive a little longer. You've even caught yourself hesitating when someone asks your name, not because you're afraid, but because you must remember which one you're using this week. It used to bother you. Now it's a reflex like breathing or lying. You tried, once, to use your real name again. Just once. You met someone in a quiet town, a weaver's apprentice with a soft voice and too much curiosity. They asked, and you told them. Just the first name. Just a whisper. For a moment, you felt human again. They died 2 days later. Wrong place, wrong time. An accident, they said, but you knew better. You never spoke that name again. It's not just the name you buried. It's everything attached to it. Your old laugh, your old fears, the way you used to cry when your hands shook after a kill. You smothered it all under the cloak of professionalism, because that's what this job demands. Forget yourself before someone else remembers. You sometimes hear names in passing that make your chest tighten, not because they're yours, but because they sound like someone you used to know, or someone you could have been. And it reminds you just how far you've drifted from the life that might have once been possible. You don't write your name down. Not in letters, not in contracts, not in the dirt by firelight when you're bored and alone. You fear the ink itself might betray you. There's a kind of freedom in that, strange as it is. With no name, you can be anyone. A wandering priest, a mercenary, a mute stable hand. You've played them all, and the world never notices because the world doesn't look too closely at anybody. But deep down, some part of you still holds that name. Not like a keepsake, but like a scar. Not open, not bleeding, but there, faint, permanent. Proof that you were someone before you became what you are now. And maybe, someday, you'll whisper it again when this is all over, if it ever ends to yourself, in a place no one can hear. To prove you're still real. Until then, you'll keep changing, keep adapting, keep surviving. Because in this profession, the safest name to carry is none. There's no recruitment office for assassins, no flyers nailed to tavern doors that say, "Help wanted, must be discreet, morally flexible and okay with heights." No interviews, no uniforms, just desperation, timing, and a moment when you realize that silence was more profitable than honesty. Everyone who ends up in your line of work comes from somewhere. You didn't just appear in a puff of dark smoke and existential dread. You were someone once. Not important, not famous, but someone. Some start as soldiers, cut loose after a war ends, after a commander dies, after they see one too many things that don't fit into peace. The army trains you to follow orders, swing a blade, and march until your feet forget how to bleed. But when the banners fall and the war songs stop, you're left with no coin, no cause, and a sword that feels awkward when you're not using it. You weren't made for farming. You weren't built for sitting in a tavern waiting to die of boredom. So you kept doing the one thing you were good at, hurting people, but now you do it more quietly. Others begin as thieves, street rats, pickpockets, the kind who vanish in crowds and eat bread that didn't belong to them 5 minutes ago. You learned how to move without being seen, how to lie with your face, your voice, your body. Eventually, someone saw potential. I offered a coin for something more permanent than a stolen apple. And some, like you, just slipped. One mistake, one fight, one act of anger or fear. You killed someone, not out of training or calculation, but instinct. And then you ran. And then you did it again. But this time, for pay. Because if you're already the villain in someone's story, why not charge admission? You tell yourself it was survival. That's how it always starts. The first kill is an accident. The second is a decision. The third is a profession. You didn't plan on staying. No one does. You told yourself it was temporary, until you saved up enough to disappear. I want to start a new life, in a warm town with boring problems. A city where no one checks their backs when they hear footsteps. It's a town where you don't dream in daggers and wake up clutching your wrist like it belongs to someone else. But days turned into weeks. Jobs got easier, or at least less impossible. You became good at not being seen, at getting in and out without a trace. You didn't smile anymore, but you stopped flinching too. Progress. You tried other work now and then, bricklaying, shiploading, scribing for a bored monk who liked to drink. You weren't bad at them, But they were too slow, too honest. You didn't know what to do with your hands when they weren't reaching for a hidden knife. People say this job corrupts you. That's not quite true. It reveals you. What was buried deep, anger, fear, hunger for control, rises in this life. And once it's out, it doesn't go back in. You don't brag about your past. You don't even mention it unless you pretend to be someone else. I was a soldier, a butcher, a traveling potter with an allergy to sunlight. All lies, all easier to say than the truth. I was desperate, and someone noticed. Even now, after all the names you've used and the lives you've ended, you wonder if that first version of you still exists somewhere, buried under the layers of blood and falsehood. A young fool who believed in fairness, flinched at cruelty, and thought the world rewarded effort instead of ruthlessness. You don't mourn that person, but sometimes you miss the clarity. Because now, every job feels like a wager you didn't agree to. You step into the shadows repeatedly, telling yourself it's just for now. Just one more contract, one more town, one more escape. But deep down, you know. This isn't part-time work anymore. This is who you are. Your most excellent skill isn't killing, it's disappearing. Not just into alleys, rooftops, or tavern back doors, but from memory, from rumor, from the story itself. You're the ghost no one saw, the accident no one witnessed, the misfortune conveniently blamed on someone else. You don't just erase lives, you erase your presence from theirs. No one knows you were ever there when a job is done well. The target ceases. A faint cry in the night. A candle was blown out too early. A chair tipped over near a stairwell. Nothing dramatic, nothing poetic. Just absence, swift and final. The nobles like it that way. They don't want spectacle. They want silence. They want the body removed before the soup gets cold. They want rumors contained, succession lines secured, and awkward debts erased without a fuss. You are the quiet broom that sweeps scandal under the rug before anyone notices the mess. And when people do whisper, it's never about you. They say the baron had a weak heart, and the merchant had slipped on the stairs. The squire was always clumsy around horses, and no one suspected foul play, because no one wanted to admit someone like you could be that close to their world. It's easier to believe in coincidence than to face how fragile power truly is. You've left entire towns behind without a single person remembering your face. You ate at their tables, slept under their roofs, and stood behind them in line for bread. And when the news spread about the Duke's sudden fever, you were already a shadow home, Tao down the road. There are no monuments for your work. No songs, no records, not even a scrawled name on the back pages of a ledger. You are a secret within a secret. A breath was lost to the wind. You've left entire towns behind without a single person remembering your face. You ate at their tables, slept under their roofs, and stood behind them in line for bread. And when the news spread about the Duke's sudden fever, you were already a shadow down the road. There are no monuments for your work. No songs, no records, not even a scrawled name on the back pages of a ledger. You are a secret within a secret. A breath was lost to the wind. Once you passed through a village where someone had just died. A baker, beloved, generous, loud. People wept, told stories, brought flowers, and you stood at the crowd's edge, watching, realizing you've never been mourned, and never will be. You've caused grief, yes, but your name is never in the eulogy. You've ended bloodlines, and no one blamed you. Entire inheritances shifted because you tilted the balance of family trees. But history books chalk it up to timing, illness, bandits, bad weather. You exist between the lines, in the blank spaces, the things left unsaid. Even the people who hire you don't know who you are. They see a contact, who knows a whisper, who knows a coin drop in the right tavern at the right hour. You could walk past the person who paid for a death you delivered, and they'd nod politely, none the wiser. That's how clean your work is. That's how buried you've become. You've broken into homes where a child sleeps in the next room, where a dog barked once, then went quiet with a scrap of meat. where the only witness was a cat who watched with vague disapproval. You don't leave blood trails. You don't leave anything. Sometimes you glimpse yourself in polished metal or still water and wonder, if no one knows you exist, do you? You once watched a trial for a murder you committed. A local drunk was blamed. The evidence? He had bad handwriting and a grudge. He cried when they sentenced him. You turned away before they dragged him out. You didn't stay for the end. That was when you stopped asking whether you were doing the right thing. It doesn't matter what you believe. You don't exist to be right. You exist to erase. There's a strange kind of power in that. When done right, you become untouchable. Not because you're feared, but forgotten. A rumor's rumor. It is a story told too quietly to survive the winter. You've heard people describe you. None of them were accurate. He wore green. You didn't. He had a limp. That day, yes. She was a noble in disguise. Not even close. It's like watching someone paint a portrait of a ghost they never saw. Blurred, uncertain, always just beyond recognition. And that's precisely how you like it. Because in this line of work, fame isn't the reward. It's the noose. You never get used to it. The moment right before it happens, the space between breath and decision. The weight of a weapon suddenly feels too light or too heavy, never just right. Every time you draw your blade, you're gambling. Not with gold, with your life. It doesn't matter how many times you've done it before. The risk doesn't shrink. You learn to dance with it better, quieter, closer, more desperate. Because the truth is, the margin for error in your line of work is laughably thin. A slip of the hand, a squeaky floorboard, a guard who decides for the first time in a month not to nap during his shift. That's it. That's all it takes for everything to fall apart. You've trained yourself to notice the little things, the angle of the candle, the tilt of a bed frame, the half-eaten apple that wasn't there earlier. All signs that someone's awake, aware, waiting. You study a room like a poet studies silence, looking for where the danger hides between the lines. And when the moment comes, your breath slows, your mind empties. Not because you're calm, but because your hand will shake if you overthink, and shaking is death. You once missed your mark by an inch, just one. The dagger landed in the shoulder, not the throat. He screamed. You panicked. The entire building lit up like a festival gone wrong. You escaped by diving out a second-story window onto a cart of turnips. You limped for 3 weeks. To this day, you still twitch when someone offers you root vegetables. That was a lesson. Hesitation is louder than footsteps. Another time, you struck too quickly. No scouting, no caution. You thought you had the drop on a chancellor in his study. The chancellor was a decoy, and the real one was already behind you with a crossbow. You lived because the bolt hit a silver flask tucked in your belt. You never drank from it again, but you've carried it ever since. Every mark is a puzzle, not just how to kill, but how to escape afterward. How can it vanish before the scream? The blood hits the marble, and the steward notices the wine's still warm, but the Lord isn't breathing. Your time exits with precision. You memorize the guards' routes like lullabies. You count your heartbeats between breaths and hope they don't stutter. And still, it's never enough. Because people fight back. They scream, they run, they lunge with candlesticks and dinner knives. Some cry, some beg, some go eerily quiet, as if accepting their fate is easier than defying it. Those are the worst, the ones who look you in the eye and say nothing. You remember those faces more than the panicked ones. Because they knew, and they still didn't flinch. And when the job doesn't go as planned, you improvise. A curtain becomes a shield. A candlestick becomes a club. A chicken once became an unwilling accomplice in your getaway. You never returned to that village. Not because they recognized you. You think the chicken still holds a grudge. You know, assassins boast about clean kills, about silence, about style. But when it comes down to it, survival doesn't care about elegance. A messy kill is still a kill. A desperate escape is still freedom. The only thing that matters is not being left on the floor when the door bursts open. You've come home with blood that wasn't yours under your fingernails, with bruises blooming on your ribs you don't remember hitting. with a dagger half bent and a mind screaming that next time you might not be so lucky. And you believe it, every time. And yet you keep going, because each mission is a game you're forced to play. And every time you draw your blade, you flip a coin with death itself. Heads, you live. Tails, no one will ever know your name. You don't truly exist until the sun goes down. Daylight is dangerous. Too many eyes, too many questions. In the light, you're a stranger, a suspicion, a detail that doesn't fit. But once dusk settles and the shadows stretch, you become something else. Something useful, something feared, something free. Night is your element, your ally, your shield. Everything changes when the light fades. Towns quiet, guards yawn, candles flicker and doors creak just a little too loud. The world slows down, loses focus. People stop noticing what's moving behind them. That's when you start to matter. You've memorized the patterns of darkness. You know which alleys are safe, which rooftops hold weight, and which windows never latch properly. You've timed the bells of 5 different churches in 3 cities, because sometimes a toll hides the sound of footsteps or a quickly silenced cry. You don't carry a torch. Light betrays. It catches eyes, casts shadows, and announces your presence like a fanfare played on the edge of a blade. No, you move by memory and instinct. You've counted the cracks in the stone and every staircase's slope. You can navigate a castle corridor blindfolded if you had to. You have once. Long story. Involved a rat and a jealous librarian. At night, even your breathing changes. Slower, quieter. You blend into the air. You're not trying to be invisible. You are invisible. People don't see what they aren't expecting. And no one expects death in the form of a shoeless figure creeping across their roof with a half-rusted knife and breath that smells like dried onions and patience. There's a rhythm to nighttime survival. The first few hours are about preparation, scouting, timing, checking if the guards are alert or just pretending. Midnight is your prime between the 3rd and 4th patrol. When the kitchens are empty, the corridors are fabulous, and the world forgets to watch its back. The moon can be your enemy, though. Too bright, and you're exposed. Too dark, and you're slow. You've prayed to clouds more than any god. A little overcast can be the difference between a clean kill and being shot off a balcony by someone you didn't know was there. You wear the night like a second skin. Your cloak blends into shadows, your boots scuff silently on stone, and your tools are wrapped in cloth to avoid the dreaded clink. Every detail matters. You once fell a coin's edge because it jingled too loud in your pocket. You've tied rags around buckles, sewn padding into your belt, removed every squeak from your gear with beeswax and superstition. And still, the night doesn't always keep you safe. You've seen guards with good ears, dogs with better noses. Once, a child saw you crouched outside her window. She didn't scream, she just stared, then closed the shutters. You left without finishing the job. You often wonder what she thought you were. The daytime world would never accept you. It's too orderly. It is too full of faces that know each other. You can't pass in broad daylight for long. People notice strangers. They ask questions. And questions are knives with invisible handles, sharper the longer they hang in the air. So you wait. Always wait. In basements, under carts, inside hollowed tree trunks if you have to. You've napped in graveyards and goat pens to make it to nightfall without drawing attention. And when the sun finally dips beneath the horizon, you breathe. For the first time all day, you breathe fully. It's strange, being most alive when everything else is asleep. When the world forgets itself, the rules begin to bend. At night, you can slip past locked doors, read stolen letters, watch lords snore in silk and sin, and vanish before anyone stirs. Sometimes, you even pause to look at the stars. Not out of romance, out of habit. They help you navigate. They remind you that even the most important people you've ever killed are just flickers under an ancient sky that doesn't care. And maybe that's comforting. Because in the dark, there's no glory, no fame, just the work, the breath, the moment, the silence. You don't need the world to know your name. You need the night to let you in. You've tried to leave before, more than once. There was a spring a few years back when the world smelled clean and you had enough coin tucked under a loose floorboard to make it out. Buy a mule, change your name again, maybe even settle in some sleepy village where no one asks why your hands twitch near cutlery. You got as far as the border, but someone recognized your boots. That was the first time you realized you might never truly escape. Because the deeper you go into this life, the more pieces you leave behind. Pieces that trail behind you like crumbs in a forest full of wolves. And the truth is, you wouldn't fit in anymore. Not with them. Not with normal people. You can't hammer nails into planks without checking who's watching. You can't carry a basket of apples without glancing over your shoulder. You can't hear a bell toll without instinctively counting the paces to the nearest alley. You tried working at a smithy once. The forge master liked you, said you had good shoulders and quiet hands. But after 2 weeks, someone asked why you never looked people in the eye or slept with a dagger under the hay pile. Why did you flinch every time a pot dropped? You left before they finished the sentence. The worst part? You didn't even miss it. You've become so accustomed to the rhythm of your work, the quiet steps, the flick of a wrist, the hush that follows, that anything else feels loud, clumsy. It's like pretending to be human after forgetting how your name used to sound. You've met others like you, veterans of this life, grayer, slower. Some are still in the game. Some are trying to step out of it. You can always tell. They move differently. Their eyes scan the same corners. Their smiles are small and sharp and rarely reach their cheeks. One old man once said, "You don't leave this life. You just outlive the people trying to kill you." Then he laughed. Then he coughed. Then he dropped dead. Not from poison, just from being old. This may be the only mercy this world offers for someone like him. Sometimes you think about what you'd do if you could leave, where you'd go, who you'd be, but the image is always hazy. You don't dream in specifics anymore, just shapes. A roof, a field, a fire, someone humming a tune that doesn't end in screaming. But you know better. Even if you left, the world wouldn't let you be. Someone would find you, not out of vengeance, but convenience. You know too much. You've seen too much. You're too valuable to stay forgotten. They'd pull you back in with a coin, threat, or some quiet message delivered via a barmaid who isn't a barmaid. Or worse, they'd send someone like you, and you wouldn't see it coming. You've walked that road before. You know how to vanish. But even ghosts leave footprints. And the ones who say they've truly left, they either died quietly in the snow or lay just long enough to forget they were still being hunted. So you keep moving. Not because you love life, not because you believe in the cause, but because in the future is the only direction that doesn't feel like falling apart. And maybe, just maybe, there's still a version of freedom waiting. Not the kind with flowers and sunshine, but the kind where no one's chasing you, no one's calling in a favor, no one's marking your name on a scroll at the bottom of a wine goblet. Until then, this is your world. Blade, cloak, silence. A job done. A door was left ajar. A life erased so you can keep your own. Because in this business, the only way out is to stop breathing. You don't look in mirrors often. Not because you're afraid of ghosts or vanity or superstition, but because one day, years ago, you looked and didn't recognize the person staring back. The eyes were yours. The scar on the left eyebrow is familiar. But the expression? Hollow. Something stretched thin over bone. A face shaped by silence, shadow, and too many nights pretending to be someone else. That's when you stop looking too long. Mirrors don't lie. But they don't tell the whole truth either. They show you what the world sees. A face weathered by wind and blood, neither young nor old, neither villain nor victim. It's just a shape, a presence, a mask stretched so tightly over the remnants of who you used to be that sometimes you wonder if anything tangible is left underneath. Most days, you avoid reflections entirely. Water, polished steel, shop windows. They all catch glimpses of you, but you keep walking. Because what are you supposed to do? Smile? Practice pleasantries? Tell your face that you're doing great and everything's fine. You once spent a week hiding in a noble's estate, disguised as a mute gardener. No one noticed. One afternoon, you saw yourself in a fountain as you trimmed roses and realized you looked peaceful. Not happy, just calm. You didn't kill anyone that week. It almost felt like a holiday. Until the contract reminder arrived. It slipped under a potted basil, very subtle. After that, the mask went back on. There's a strange intimacy in being so completely unknown even to yourself. You've had so many names and faces, sometimes by choice, sometimes out of necessity, that your original self feels like a rumor, a story told by someone drunk and unreliable. You might remember laughing, crying, or being afraid of the dark. But now, you are the dark. And it doesn't fear itself. You can still feel shame, though. It creeps in during the quietest moments when the job's done and the blood's been washed off. When you sit alone in a cellar rooftop or abandoned mill, there's nothing but your breath and the ache in your knees. That's when it hits. The memory of the face you saw once in a mirror that didn't flinch when you smiled. Because it's changed. You don't smile anymore, not genuinely, not with your eyes. You smirk, you perform, you project the version of yourself that gets you past guards, into kitchens, out of locked rooms. But when all of that falls away, there's only this. A set of features that stopped belonging to anyone long ago. You've learned to live with it, that empty familiarity. You even joke about it to yourself, under your breath as you tie your boots or sharpen your blade. "Who's this handsome killer?" you'll say. Then you roll your eyes, not because it's funny, but because you know no one else ever will. And yet despite all that, you still have fleeting, fragile moments where you glimpse something true. A reflex, a flicker. The way your hands tremble after a bad job. The way you exhale when someone thanks you, even if it's for something you didn't do. That humanity, it's not gone, just buried. You don't let it surface too often. It's dangerous. Compassion makes you hesitate. Empathy makes you weak. In your profession, weakness is a body count. But still, you allow yourself one indulgence. Now and then, when the night is calm and the world forgets to watch, you find a quiet place, pull out a small shard of polished copper, and look, just for a moment, just to see if anything is returned, to see if the ghost in the mirror still blinks when you do. There was a time when taking a life shook you. Not visibly, you learned early how to keep your hands steady, your breath even, your footsteps smooth. But inside, the aftershocks cracked through you like thunder under your skin. A name whispered on your tongue. A dream you didn't want, replaying the last blink of a face that didn't understand what had just happened. Now, you get hungry. Not in celebration, not as a ritual. It's just that your body starts to move on before your mind can catch up. "They're gone," it says. "Time for soup." You hate that. Not the soup, although it's rarely warm, but the fact that your reaction has become so mechanical, so quiet, so normal. You used to wonder what that meant, whether it made you a monster. Now you file it under necessary, because the truth is, if you felt everything, you'd collapse. Guilt is a luxury in this line of work. Empathy is a liability. You tried carrying it once, tried mourning, tried keeping names in your head, tried praying over corpses before slipping out the window. It didn't make you a better person. It just slowed you down. You stopped asking who they were and reading the notes in their pockets. I stopped looking at family portraits on mantles. Those things stay with you. They grow teeth. And one night, you wake up whispering names you were never meant to know, clutching your blade like a drowning man hugging driftwood. Now, there are still echoes, tiny things, a lock of hair that reminds you of someone. The sound of boots in a hallway matches a long dead target, a scent of cinnamon that lingers from a chambermaid's perfume. They pass, but sometimes they leave a mark, soft, invisible, lasting. You once killed a man who was already dying. He looked at you, smiled faintly, and said, "Thank you." You didn't ask why. You didn't want to know. But the words followed you for weeks, as if they were a curse you accidentally earned. Then came the child. Not your job, never your target. Just there, watching. You left them unharmed, of course. But something about how they looked at you, as if they understood exactly what you were, still haunts the quietest part of your soul. You can't forget that stare. You've tried. You've convinced yourself this is survival, a necessary shedding of conscience. And that's mostly true. But now and then, you catch yourself reacting inappropriately to something normal. A laugh too sharp, a tear that doesn't come. It's a lost story that feels like math instead of emotion. You are not numb. You feel. It's just selective, filtered and processed like stale bread. You ration your emotions now. There is a slight regret here, a flicker of sorrow there. Nothing too heavy, nothing that can't be folded up and buried before morning. But the real cost isn't the silence. It's forgetting what you used to care about. You used to cry at cruelty, flinch at suffering. You had nightmares after your first kill that left you gasping for air. Now, if you dream at all, it's just flashes, running feet, a locked door, sometimes a name that might have been yours. You don't cry anymore. You haven't in years. Not because you're strong, but because there's nothing left to ring out. There's no training for this. No warning. No moment someone taps you on the shoulder and says, "Careful now." This is the part where your soul starts leaking out. It just happens slowly. One job at a time. One face at a time. Until, someday, you stop recognizing yourself in the quiet. And the terrifying part? You don't even miss it. Nobody retires from this job with a pension and a farewell feast. There's no gold watch, no gentle applause from appreciative clients, and no final contract followed by a letter of recommendation. If you're lucky, you get a grave no one bothers to dig twice. Even the ones who live long enough to stop killing rarely admit what they were. They say they were scouts, messengers, mercenaries, nothing but what they did in the dead of night, with silent feet and quieter guilt. And you get it. Who would want to be remembered for that? You've met a few who got out. They speak carefully, with eyes that dart toward shadows even in full daylight. One of them runs a bakery now. It doesn't sell pies with knives in them, despite the rumors. He says his life is simpler, sweeter, and quieter. But you saw him flinch when someone dropped a spoon behind him. Another raises goats, lives by the sea. He has a limp that he claims came from falling off a roof, not from a failed hit. His goats like him. That alone feels like proof he's trying to be someone better.
But they never talk about the details.
Never say the words. Admitting it aloud makes it real again. And once you've stopped, the last thing you want is to remember. Sometimes, you wonder what you'd say if someone asked you directly, "What do you do?" Would you lie, like always? Would you chuckle and say, "Bit of everything," or "just passing through"? Or would you stare, tired and honest, and say, "I take people out of the world, quietly, even if you retired, truly, cleanly"? What would you do? Build furniture? Herd sheep? Open a wine shop with a back room that smells faintly of regret? Could you look someone in the eye and say, "You've never killed anyone? That your hands are clean"? Could you teach children to read without checking the window every 5 minutes? And more importantly, would they believe you? There's a man in the capital they call the locksmith. Rumor has it he used to be one of the best. Fast, discreet, untraceable. Now he sells tools and sharpens scissors. People laugh. Imagine if he was an assassin, and he smiles, shrugs, sharpens a blade a little too well. You passed through once. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. You recognize the way he stood, back, never to the door. They say you can never escape your past. That might be true. But they don't say that sometimes your past doesn't chase you. It just waits, like an old knife left under a floorboard. Still sharp, still dangerous, just asleep. And yet, you think about it. Not often, but enough. What if one day you stopped, burned the contracts, buried the blades, let the world spin without your interference? Would it miss you? Would anyone notice? Probably not. And that's the dream. To leave quietly. To walk into obscurity so thoroughly that even you forget what you were. To become the blacksmith no one questions. The farmer who's a little too good with rope. The herbalist who keeps the poisons hidden behind the lavender. It sounds nice. But nice isn't real. Not for people like you. People like you don't retire. You vanish. And hope the silence holds. You've always known how this ends. Not because of some prophecy, a vision in a haunted mirror, or a crow that refuses to leave your windowsill. You know, deep down, the way a coin knows it'll fall, or a flame knows it won't last the wind. No one retires from this life with gray hair and grandchildren. They stop being seen. You've outlived many. Some are better than you, sharper, faster, calmer under pressure. But their luck ran dry. They missed a step. I trusted the wrong whisper. I didn't notice that the kitchen boy had a knife in his apron. And now there's stories. Ghosts. Names are spoken in low tones that fade too fast. The funny thing is, you've been to more funerals than most priests. But none of them were yours.
Yet, you don't fear death.
Not exactly. You fear the timing. The humiliation of slipping on a wet tile and being found in an undignified heap with your blade still sheathed. You fear dying for a job that doesn't matter. For a coin you never got. For a client who won't even remember what they paid you for. You want your death to mean something, or at least to happen on your terms. But you also know that's unlikely, because one day someone younger, hungrier, and quieter will come for you. Maybe they'll be good. Perhaps they'll be lucky. Doesn't matter. The result is the same. You'll blink, and they'll be standing where you once stood, holding the same dull knife, walking the same silent path you thought only you had mapped. You've imagined it. Not out of drama, just preparation. Maybe it's a poison drink you didn't sniff properly. Perhaps it's a lover you shouldn't have trusted. Perhaps it's an old enemy who finally remembered your name. Or maybe, worst of all, it's a friend. If such things still exist. You've left instructions, of course. Quiet ones. A few coin caches in forgotten wells. A sealed letter that says helpful nothing but makes you feel like you had something to say. And a safe house with a trap door under the floor. Because if someone comes for you, you at least want the satisfaction of them falling into goat dung before finishing the job. You've accepted it, you think, most days. You don't forget the close calls, the jobs where death leaned in a little too close, whispered something hot and breathless into your ear, and then stepped back, smirking, just to let you know it could have taken you but didn't. Not yet. The worst part isn't the fear, it's how normal it feels. There was one night, rain, of course, because these stories always begin with rain. When you slipped into a manor thinking it would be simple, a second-tier noble with more debts than brains. You'd done the prep, scouted the guards, bribed the kitchen boy with a single copper and half a joke. Everything was routine. Until it wasn't. The target wasn't in his chambers, the wine was untouched, the bed is unslept, and the dog, missing. You knew something was wrong, but you moved forward anyway. Because that's what you do when there's no good choice. Halfway down the corridor, you heard the soft shuffle of someone breathing behind a tapestry and not moving. Just waiting. And that's when it hit you. They were expecting you. The job wasn't a job. It was a setup. A contract is placed not to remove a threat, but to attract one, namely, you. You didn't run. There wasn't time. You dove sideways as the first bolt cut the air where your head had been. Rolled once, twice, blade out, cloak catching on a brass wall sconce. Everything that followed was a blur. Steel, shouting, smoke. You don't remember how you got out. Only that you woke up 2 days later in a cellar you didn't recognize, with a stitched side, a broken rib, and a mouth full of dried blood and shame. You never went back. Not to the city. Not to the name you used for that job. You burned the clothes and buried the tools. For weeks, you checked every shadow twice. I slept with one boot on. You ate only food you cooked yourself. That was the closest. But not the only. Another time you were climbing out a window when the ledge gave way. You fell 3 stories and landed in a hay cart. A real one, not metaphorical, not cushioned. Real hay, real pitchfork, inches from your throat. You lay there, stunned, while 2 farmers argued whether you were drunk, cursed, or a very ugly angel. Or the time the mark turned out to be a trained fighter. That was new. He parried your blade with a fireplace poker and asked, "Do you even know why they want me dead?" You didn't. You still don't. But you knocked him unconscious with a candlestick anyway, and ran like your childhood depended on it. The thing about close calls is that they linger, not just in the bruises or the scars, but in the way you check windows now. In the way your hand hovers half an inch higher above your hilt. Silence no longer feels comforting, but tense, coiled like a bowstring, waiting to snap. You've come to expect betrayal. A blade in the back, a cup that smells slightly off, a friend who forgets to blink when they say, "Trust me." You don't panic anymore. You adjust. Because panic is loud. Panic is a luxury you can't afford. After that night in the manor, you started writing fake escape plans. Not for you, but for the people watching you. If they think you'll run north, leave tracks pointing that way, then slip east. If they feel you're carrying a dagger, you bring 2. One for them, one for whoever hired them. You're not paranoid. You're prepared. Because in this world, a single blink at the wrong moment can cost everything, and you've already lost enough. So you remember those close calls, not to dwell, but to sharpen. They're the grindstone against which you hone every instinct, every movement, every lie. They say a good assassin is invisible. You think a better one is paranoid. Because the moment you stop being afraid of death is the moment you stop noticing when it's already behind you. You've seen it before. The way someone like you disappears. No funeral, no grave, no procession of mourners with bowed heads and trembling hands. No eulogy. Just absence. One day they're whispering in a tavern corner, brushing a blade clean behind a curtain, biting into bread that isn't theirs. And the next, nothing. No one even bothers to ask where they went, because no one ever knew who they were. You knew a man called Flint, probably not his real name. You crossed paths 3 times. I shared a drink once. He had a scar over his lip and a laugh like an old rope. One day, someone mentioned they'd found a body in a barrel by the docks, gutted, quiet, anonymous. You never asked. You never confirmed. But you know. Then there was Mira. Fast. Smarter than you. She once took a contract you turned down and completed it in half the time. Last you heard, she'd been spotted in a brothel kitchen peeling turnips with a dagger that used to belong to a duke. Then silence. A month passed, a year, and the silence never ended. Sometimes people vanish because they choose to. Sometimes because someone else does the choosing. Either way, the world moves on. The walls don't remember the fingers that touched them. The floorboards don't miss the weight of your steps. The window frame doesn't care who last slipped through it under dark cover. And when you go, it will be the same. No one will carve your name into stone. Not because they don't care, but because they don't know it. You've erased yourself so thoroughly that even your memory doesn't stick. And if someone did light a candle for you, it would flicker once, then die before the wax even pooled. But here's the strange thing. You don't fear that. In a world where every name becomes a target, anonymity is peace. And this is what peace looks like for people like you. Not parades or poems, but stillness. A final, absolute stillness. One where you aren't running, hiding, stabbing, vanishing. One where your last breath doesn't echo but disappears into the air, soft as dust. You imagine your ending sometimes. Not morbidly, just practically. A fall from a rooftop, quick and clean. A quiet choke in an alley. A dart in the neck from someone younger, hungrier, slightly more desperate. Or maybe you'll slip in the bath and be found 2 days later by a confused landlord and an unconvinced goat. You'd prefer something simple, unremarkable, something that matches the rest of your life. And yet you wonder, will someone feel it? The absence? The gap in the world where your silence used to hum like a blade half-drawn. You think about the few people who've seen you as more than a shadow. A tavern keeper who always gave you the seat near the back wall. A washerwoman who never asked questions about the stains. A child you once pulled out of a fire during a job gone wrong. Do they still remember you? Probably not. But maybe, just maybe, someone will glance into the dark one evening and think, there used to be something there. And maybe that's enough. Because if you're going to die alone, quietly, without name or song or shrine, you might as well go the way you lived. Unseen, efficient, necessary, and forgotten. They say there were once assassins so good, fast, and silent that they could kill a man in a crowded throne room and leave nothing but a whisper behind. That they vanished into the mist. They walked through locked doors. Even the crows held their breath when they passed. You've heard the names. Everyone in this life has. The Black Fox, the Seamstress, Old Tallow. Figures who might have been real, or invented in a smoky tavern to make greenhorns soil their boots. One story tells of an assassin who never used weapons, only words. A single sentence was whispered into the right ear, and within a day the target was dead, by poison, guilt, or betrayal. Some say he still walks the streets, whispering, waiting. Others say he whispered to himself one night and never woke up. Another tale speaks of a woman who worked alone for decades, never missed, never seen. Until one day she killed the wrong person, an emperor's son maybe, or a very powerful dog breeder, depending on who's telling the story. She disappeared that same night. Some say she was hunted. Some say she became the hunter. And then there's the one about a boy, just a child, who killed a king with nothing but a loaf of bread and a smile. You always like that one. It's ridiculous, of course, but something about the absurdity makes it feel possible. You wonder how much of it is true, how much was embellished, how much was a pure invention from people like you, tired, dirty, huddled by firelight, needing to believe someone out there made it work, that the game can be played and won, that someone, somewhere, figured out how to live in this trade without it devouring them. Because let's face it, you need the myths. You need to believe in someone better, someone who survived, someone who found a way out. That may be why people keep repeating the stories. Why do they whisper them between contracts, over dice games, and behind kitchens? Not just to scare each other, but to hold on to hope. It's a twisted, unlikely hope. The kind that says, if they could do it, maybe you can too. But myths come with danger. You once met someone who believed too hard. He called himself the next Black Fox. They wore a ridiculous hat. I thought being legendary meant being loud. He lasted 2 weeks. You don't talk about how he died. Not because it was tragic, but because it was so foolish. Believing you're a legend is the quickest way to become a cautionary tale. Still, part of you listens. Part of you watches the shadows for signs of greatness. Part of you wants to know if any of them were real. You followed rumors and traced stories. Once, you even found a cottage that might have belonged to Old Tallow. It was empty, dusty. The floorboards creaked like they remembered someone heavier than you. On the wall, carved faintly, were 3 words. Not worth it. You stared at them for a long time. You've seen patterns repeat. A method, a mark, a style. Sometimes, someone out there may still be working. Someone older, wiser, wrapped in legend but still making quiet moves. Not for fame, not for gold. To remind the world they're not gone. And maybe that's what you're doing too. Building your myth. One missed poster at a time. One untraceable death at a time. You don't want fame, but you wouldn't mind being remembered the way these stories are told. With awe, with disbelief, with just enough truth to make it dangerous. Because deep down, every assassin hopes they might someday become the story someone else tells. Even if no one ever knows your name. The truth is, most of your life isn't rooftops or duels in candlelight. It's mud. It's marketplaces. It's pretending to haggle over turnips while calculating which guard is about to notice the bulge under your cloak. It's survival disguised as routine. You spend more time among fishmongers and shouting bakers than in the halls of power. Not because you enjoy the smell of herring and horse dung, but because anonymity lives in noise. No one notices the silent one in the crowd. Not when vendors scream about cabbages and children chase chickens into barrels. You know the layout of every marketplace better than the homes you grew up in. The angles of the stalls, which carts creak when pushed. The older woman always complains about thieves but never locks her coin pouch. You move like a ghost in a sea of chaos. Just another face in the stew of people trying to stay fed and unstabbed. Sometimes you think you're more of an actor than a killer. You've posed as a spice seller, a cloth merchant, and a drunk uncle looking for his niece's wedding. You've sold fake relics. Once, you convinced a bishop's assistant that a chicken bone belonged to a saint. You pocketed the coin and left town before the chicken finished laying eggs.
It's not glamorous. You once spent 3 days pretending to be a man who sells nothing but firewood with sarcastic slogans burned into it. Your most popular stick said, "This log hates you." It's sold out. Why? Because no one expects the assassin to be the idiot shouting, "Buy my angry twigs" in the square. And while you're blending in, danger tiptoes up beside you. You once made eye contact with a fellow assassin across a fruit stall. Neither of you said anything, just a nod, a breath, a shared understanding. This place isn't for us. It never was. But here we are, between the fish guts and the soap vendors, acting like we belong. The people around you? They have no idea. They gossip about taxes, trade, and marriages. They argue over the price of cheese. They complain about the smell. None of them realize that 2 feet away, someone is carrying 3 vials of poison and a map to the Baron's summer home. It's humbling and oddly comforting to be surrounded by life while walking hand in hand with death. To listen to a cobbler sing badly about his ex-wife while you decide if the corridor behind his shop is safe to use as an exit. To watch children mock fight with wooden swords while you hide a real one under your cloak. But it wears on you. The pretending, the performance, the constant weight of knowing that any of these ordinary people, any one of them, could recognize you, or worse, be watching you for someone else. The baker's apprentice who glances too often. The older man sweeping near the well constantly hums the same tune. That one butcher whose knives are too sharp. You don't trust crowds, but you need them. They're covered. They're witnesses. They're a wall of noise behind which you can vanish. You've ducked guards by hugging a cabbage cart and vanished from pursuit by walking behind a parade of dancing donkeys. You've survived more close calls thanks to pigs, priests, and pastry carts than you care to count. But sometimes, you long for silence. Real silence. Not the hush before a kill, but the kind that isn't watching, isn't waiting, isn't hiding knives in smiles. A life where your every breath doesn't echo like a question waiting for an answer that ends in blood. You don't belong in the marketplaces, but you keep returning. Because among the mud and the mess and the mundane, you almost feel human again. Almost. Until someone says the wrong word and your hand goes to your belt. And just like that, the mask slips back on. It didn't happen all at once. There was no moment when you woke up and thought, I am no longer who I used to be. No dramatic monologue in the rain. No sword raised to the heavens. It's just a slow shift. A quiet, creeping erosion of something that might have once been called you. You still bleed. Still sleep. I still flinch when someone throws a rock too close. But somewhere along the way, you stopped responding to your name. Not because it's dangerous, but because it doesn't sound right anymore. You used to look people in the eye, smile when someone offers kindness. Now, you calculate what that smile costs. You weigh every word before it leaves your lips, then regret it for giving too much away. You scan for exits in every room, even the ones that feel safe, especially those. And when was the last time you laughed? Not a chuckle to deflect suspicion. Not a dry snore to someone's stupidity. A real laugh. One that didn't feel like a lie lodged in your throat. You don't remember. Somewhere between the contracts and the consequences, you became something else. Not quite a monster, not quite a ghost, but something in between. You walk differently now. Shoulders are always slightly angled. One foot is never fully planted. The kind of stance that says, I'm not staying. And you're not. You never are. You talk less, eat faster, sleep shallower. You've grown used to hunger, honest or emotional. You've stopped hoping for letters, for recognition, for some moment when someone stops and says, you look tired, sit down. Because the last time someone said that, you almost cried. And you can't afford to do that anymore. Not because it's weak, because it would make you remember. You still pretend, of course. The routine never stops. You walk into villages, borrow a new name, and smile with the appropriate amount of tooth. But it feels like puppetry now, like watching someone else move your limbs while you hide in the shadows behind your own eyes. And when the job comes, when the time arrives to do what you do best, it's not adrenaline you feel, it's nothing. No thrill, no dread, just procedure. Like brushing your teeth, like tying your boots, like removing someone from the world. And afterward, you wipe the blade, wipe your hands, wipe your memory. You've forgotten more faces than you've ever known. And sometimes you wonder, if all the memories are gone, if all the feelings have dulled, what's left? Are you still a person? Or are you just a function, a necessary evil for hire? Someone once asked you what you'd do if you weren't doing this. A child maybe, or a drunk, or a dying man. Those categories blur together. And you lied, of course. Said you'd be a sailor, or a cook, or a sheep farmer. But deep down you knew you'd still be running. Because you don't know how to stop. Because you don't know who you are without the silence, the steel, the endless movement forward. Because stopping would mean standing still, long enough to feel everything you've buried. And if you ever did that, you might not survive it. You are no longer becoming anything. You've already become. Not a legend, not a villain, not a hero. It's just a shadow that forgot it once had a shape. And still, you move. Because movement is all you have left. You'll feel it before it happens. Not pain, not fear. Something quieter. A stillness that settles in your bones like the last breath of a dying fire. The air will taste different, thicker, sharper, like rain about to fall. And for the first time in a long time, you won't reach for your blade, because you'll know it won't matter. You'll be somewhere familiar. A place you've passed through before. A market, a chapel, a ruined tower where moss climbs the walls like it's trying to forget what it once held. You'll pause, breathe, and realize, this is it. The end isn't a storm, it's a hush. No one will shout your name. No one will cry out in recognition. There won't be a crowd, just you and someone else. The space between you shrinking faster than your heart can keep up. It may be a mistake, a younger assassin who thinks taking you down earns a badge of honor. Perhaps it's a grudge you forgot to remember. Maybe it's fate, tired of letting you win. You won't plead. You won't run. You might even smile. Because deep down, you've always known this was waiting for you. Like a misstep on a staircase. Like a quiet knock on a door you forgot to lock. It was never a question of if, only when. And if you're lucky, it'll be clean, quick, professional. It's a cut too fast to feel, a fall too dark to see. You won't leave behind a legend. No tales to echo in taverns. No whispered myths. It's just a space where you used to be. A bed that never got turned down. A set of boots never claimed. Someone may pass through the same place weeks later and feel something. Not grief. Not fear. Just the faintest sense that someone dangerous, tired, and quiet once stood here and moved on. Maybe they'll sit where you sat, drink what you drank, and wonder, briefly, who came before them. They won't know your name, but that's how you wanted it. Because the final truth of this life, the one they never write in the stories, is that there's no grand exit, no blaze of glory, just a night like any other, and a silence that finally stops moving. Now, let all that fade away. Hyvrius, the shadows, the silence, the weight of a blade against your hip. Let the rooftops vanish into the mist. The footfalls soften into the earth. The whispers drift into the wind. You've carried this story long enough. It's okay to set it down now. Breathe slowly, gently. Picture a place where the night is kind, not dangerous, not watching. A place where the stars aren't witnesses but lullabies. The cobblestones are cool, not cruel. The wind was a soft hush instead of a warning. Whatever you were, whatever name you wore, whoever remembered or forgot you, none of that matters now. You're here. You made it. Through the darkness, through the noise, through all the things you thought would end you. And still, you breathe. So let yourself rest. No more running. No more hiding. No more pretending to be less human than you are. Just sleep. Soft. Still. Safe. I'll stay here a bit longer. Just in case.